Hi, it's Pastor Steve with Happy Thoughts coming to you from Visalia, California at the Visalia Methodist Church. Good to have you with us this week. This is the final in my series that I entitled What? Where we have been discussing some of the big public discourse that has been going on in our nation and around the world. In the first two videos, I looked at the issues surrounding Black Lives Matter, some of the issues, and I looked at some of the issues concerning the LGBT movement, especially in the United States. And I looked at them from this perspective. I looked at them in order to be able to hear and to research as thoroughly as I could to hear the base of what drives those movements. And in those videos, and I hope you'll go view them if you haven't, we look at how horrendous it has been in our country for Black people since the time before the Civil War and through the modern day, and what harm has been done. I centered in on economic harm of redlining and rules set up to stop the inheritance of wealth, but it goes far beyond that. And I did that because it is necessary if we want to make a world that actually has some answers, not just political back and forth and the trading of jabs, but finds some decent human being answers. You've got to be able to listen to things that you may think that you disagree with. You have to be able to listen and understand the viewpoint and the passion that comes from other folks. And that was really instructive for me to do the research and to come to that point. In the second video, then I looked at LGBT issues, and I did the same thing. I traced some of the history, which just withers the soul. It's so harsh and so horrible what has happened to gay people in our country and the consequences of some of the things that our government has done and some of the things that the church has done over time. Now, that doesn't mean that I sign off on the whole LGBT agenda, but when you look at the history and you ask yourself, why would good people who like me and everybody else really just want to get on with their life, why would they be so impassioned and so angry and so insistent on the things that they are fighting for and about? And the answer is pretty obvious. It's because they've suffered immensely. So the vitriol and the anger and the passion that comes out of the LGBT movement, it's almost a mathematical equation, right? It's in proportion to the horrible damage and the unfair way that they have been treated. And I thought it was necessary in this kind of video blog to confess those things, right? To play fair, to be graceful, and to say, I get it. I know. I did the research. I studied, and I understand as best I can why these things are such heated movements, and why the passion that I see and the anger that I see a lot of times, why it has been unleashed. And I can't really say that it's hard to understand or that I think that they're completely out of line in the way that things are going. Now, today, I want to look at LGBT issues kind of from that vein. And here's what I want to say. It's been my observation that a couple of things are going on in the LGBT movement. The first thing is, look, if you think there's still a struggle for power or dominance in our culture between kind of a stereotypical conservative Christian and the LGBT movement, you're not paying any attention. The LGBT movement owns the country lock, stock, and barrel. There is nothing widely, publicly disseminated that doesn't go through the LGBT filters and portrays the message that they want portrayed. Now, I'm not being mean. I'm not being worrisome. I'm not even calling for any actions against that. I'm just telling the truth. You may or may not know, in our country's history, for a long time, in the 50s, 60s, maybe even into the 70s, there were really strict rules about what could be displayed in films or on television. So they had censors who made sure that nothing that was considered untoward could appear and offend children or families or whatever. And the backlash against that was really, really harsh. And it still exists in some form in the 80s, 90s, and aughts. But it dissipated a great deal. Well, it's back. Only this time it's on the shoes on the other foot, so to speak. They're not allowed to have a narrative, a TV series, a movie, a show of any kind made in the modern age that doesn't show a particular representation of gay couples. And that representation is almost always a monogamous, happy gay couple who you couldn't differentiate from any heterosexual couple except for the same-sex part of it. And I have known several gay couples who fit exactly that particular description. But it's bothersome to me that censors from the LGBT movement now clean up everything that comes out of Hollywood, everything that comes out of the television makers, so that we never see a scene and we never see a film and we never see a TV series where someone where there isn't a gay person purposely represented who is obviously gay, is outspoken in their homosexuality, who defines himself by their sexuality, even to the point where occasionally you can see that a story was written without that in it, and they just inserted a gay character because that's what the censors say that they have to do. In addition, and following up on that, if you're confused about who's in charge of the way that our country will see homosexuality represented, the American Psychiatric Association, whose rules affect therapists and psychologists and that ilk of professionals, they have clearly stated that it is not legal to find that someone's sexual proclivities, barring pedophilia, can be described as mental illness or can be attributed to mental illness. So what if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgendered or multi-sexed or pansexual, the whole long list of letters, none of those can be diagnosed as a symptom or a result of mental illness, or your license is removed and your ability to make a living is removed. There is no room for dissenting opinion. There's no room for nuanced or new opinion in that. It's a hard and fast rule. And the therapists that I have talked to, right, they're plain spoken about, nope, I'm not going to break the rules because there's no leniency, there's no discussion. If you think back, or if you remember in the other video on LGBT issues, the horror that was talked about was the same thing. If you were discovered to be gay in the military during one of the great wars, you were dismissed with a purple dismissal, and that effectively ended your ability to get a job if you lived any place outside of New York or San Francisco, and it was a devastating blow, and it was heaped on you regardless of your service as a service person in the Army or the Navy, the Air Force, or Marines. It was just bitterly horrible what was done to them. That exact same thing is now being done in the name of LGBT. And as a Christian man, a heterosexual man, as a citizen of a country where I like to think we are fair and there is room at the table for dissenting opinions, it's bothersome to me. And it's bothersome to me in this way primarily. The leadership of the LGBT movement, though a lot of the things they're pushing for, I agree with. I think that gay marriage absolutely should be a guaranteed right in our country. It's absurd to say that people who are homosexual or lesbian can't be married when we never have said the same about people who cheat on their spouses, or right. It's just crazy. It's a civil right in our country, and it should be granted. That doesn't mean as a pastor that I would perform a gay marriage. Not that I think that pastors should be forced to perform gay marriage, but that it should be legal and that it should be honored by our government. Absolutely. Those kind of things, right? Any fair-minded person who understands the founding documents of the United States would agree on that. So it's disturbing to me to see a strain of hatred and anger and viciousness in the LGBT movement. Again, the issues that I have are, why is nobody explaining the rest of those letters? How come we're not seeing bisexual people on television and seeing how difficult those relationships are, and the fact that they're not monogamous? How come we're not seeing what it means to be a pansexual? Why is that not explored through characters that we see? Why is the whole lot of the letters and all that they stand for, that's never examined? It's not allowed to be examined. In the church, where a lot of wars have taken place over these issues, I've talked with people who have more power than I do about my concerns there, right? I have known gay couples who were quite healthy, really, with whom I don't have very many issues. But the rest of those letters, when we think about ordaining people who are bisexual, when we think about ordaining people who are pansexual, when we think about ordaining people who are still exploring their sexuality, which really effectively means you sleep with anybody you feel like sleeping with until you find out whether or not you're satisfied. In the church, in our struggles, right, the rule is you're not allowed to say, well, healthy monogamous relationships. Nope. You got to take all the letters and you have to say it's fine with us if they're ordained, and we're going to, just not going to happen. Just not going to happen. My own personal refusal is based on that. I want to know much more about all those letters, and I want people to understand before they decide to vote, so they're not considered bigots, what is actually going on. Because the LGBT movement operates in this way. It's all or nothing. Everything we say, even the stuff we purposely don't say, you have to agree or you're on the bigoted list and you'll be punished. The LGBT movement is acting like the people who created the need for the LGBT movement. You don't have to be a Christian. I am, and I believe that grace and trying to find a way to forgive is a much better way. But you don't have to have that worldview to understand, oh my goodness. Well, okay, so power has shifted. Public opinion has successfully been shifted, right? And right now, people are lining up to be a part of the LGBT movement and to support everything it stands for, except for they're not. There are a lot of people who have the same questions that I do, and I'm not mad at anybody for their sexuality, but I want to know what all those things mean and what it means in practical matters, and I want people to play fair. I want movies and television series to be able to be made that don't have gay characters because it's required by LGBT law and rule, and I want psychologists and psychiatrists to be able to make their diagnosis based on their best principled opinions, not based on the fear of losing their ability to make a living. In other words, I want the LGBT movement to be more thorough and genuine in explaining what it's pushing through in all the ways that it's pushing through. And I would really genuinely like people who are attached to the LGBT movement to consider a fundamental truth. What you're doing today is the same on many levels as what was done to you. You're being hateful, you're being bigoted, you're being cruel, you're harming people for daring to disagree with you. And probably not in my lifetime, and maybe not in your lifetime, but in somebody's lifetime, our grandchildren or future generations, there's going to be another change in power. And people who are gay, who've caused nobody any harm, who just want to live their lives, just decent human beings who indeed have a different sexual proclivity, they're going to be punished, and they're going to be punished horribly. It just goes back and forth. Grace has never been a part of the equation from the Christian side or from the conservative side, and that just grieves me. Going forward, in so much as I can make any difference, I want to be graceful. And the point of this conversation is I was graceful enough to listen and to research and to see and to be shocked and to be in a place of repentance from some of my own attitudes of the past and some of the things that I didn't know. But that said, I also want grace to be a part of what goes on in the future. So to those who hold fast to the LGBT movement and everything it stands for without daring to question because you know the penalty for questioning is so severe, think about that. Stay in the LGBT movement, but have the courage to stand your ground and to ask for fuller disclosure of what's actually going on and what it all means. I'm thinking that a lot of people would sign off on a bunch of the LGBT call for rights and for respect. But I'm thinking also that a bunch of people would have nothing to do with the movement if they thought critically about all the things that go in that long list. I'm not trying to drum up hatred for anybody on the list. I'm just suggesting that some sexual behaviors and some sexual acting out is based in unhealthy emotions and spiritual life. And things have gotten to the point now where we're not even allowed to discuss that. I don't have a license as a therapist, so I can't lose my license and my ability to make a living. But it's a doggone shame that the lessons of the past of what it's like to be victimized when you don't have power haven't been learned any better than this. And now that the LGBT movement and the leaders have power, they are victimizing other people. They're disingenuous on many levels, and they are harming people who dare to disagree with them. It only ends with another swing of the pendulum going back the other way. It, in truth, I guess, never ends. I would sure like to see better leadership, more graceful leadership, more considered leadership out of the LGBT movement. So this is my part in trying to say I have really tried my best to pay attention to things that I hadn't paid attention to before, to know the truth that drives the passion. But the passion's out of control. And when it's out of control and it's cruel and it's mean and it's harmful to people, and when it removes people's rights going the other way, then it's refused to learn the lesson that it might have learned. I think we can all do better. We can moderate ourselves. We can understand the fairness issues. We can understand the respect issues, but we should be fully disclosing what our positions mean in detail and what they look like in all the things that are currently controlled by the censors that are lock, stock, and barrel controlled by the LGBT movement. That's where I'm at. For my part, as an individual follower of Jesus, I don't have any issue with gay people. I really, really don't. I don't have any issue with the fundamental rights that are being called for. I just don't have any issues. It's never been something that concerned me. But cruelty and the overuse of power, whether it's in deeply conservative religious circles or whether it's in the LGBT movement, it always concerns me because it hurts people. It hurts our society. It hurts our world, and it prolongs pain for everybody. For the folks in the LGBT movement who have been harmed, I'm really, genuinely sorry. But I assure you that unless you find your better selves and determine, having been harmed and known the sting of prejudice and hatred, that you're never going to be that way, the thing will never really get better. It'll just be backlashed, and your sin of becoming like those who sinned against you, it'll be perpetrated against generations in the future. I think we can do better. I think we can be honest. I think we can be moderate in our actions and our behaviors. And I think we can have a public discourse that allows for different points of view. As a Christian leader, I'm willing to do my part to be reasonable and to be faithful and to be kind and graceful. I hope that other folks will be too. If you're listening to this video blog, you probably have opinions, and something I said might even have made you mad, or I certainly have qualified myself in some people's views as just a hateful bigot, etc. I hope you don't receive it that way, but you might have. And if you can respectfully dialogue with me, please do. Pastor Steve, VUMC@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your comments, in so much as they're reasoned and they are graceful. And it could be that my mind will get changed more than it has already been by studying history. But history repeats, and I'm sure sorry to see what likely is going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years, whenever the pendulum swings back, because the seeds of abuse of power that are being sown now, they will bear their fruit, just as the seeds of horrific, terrible, bigoted, prejudiced, hateful behavior against gay people, they are blooming now, and the harvest is a difficult thing to watch. So it's the best I can do. Next week, we'll pick a little bit happier subjects and lighten things up a little bit. This is Happy Thoughts. I hope you have a great day wherever you are. God bless you. Be graceful.